the election. The media's covering up. The Biden crime family stealing this election. The media's covering it up. The Biden crime family stealing this election. The media's covering up. We want our freedom for the world. Give us our freedom, Joe Biden. Joe Biden's covering up this election. He's stealing it.
Welcome, everybody. If that doesn't totally encapsulate the 2020 election, I don't know what else does. Welcome to Burn It Down with Kim Brown, gang. That is a little clip of an encounter that happened out in Nevada yesterday while election officials were giving an update to the media about the status of the counting of ballots out there in, I believe, Clark County, Nevada. And that gentleman with that awesome T-shirt showed up and talked about the Biden crime family and stealing the election with all the zeal and vigor that you would imagine that someone who believes there is a Biden crime family would stand up in front of a gaggle of media people and scream at the top of his lungs. We are still in the throes of election week 2020 without a clear decision or outcome being made yet, calling the White House. Vice President or former Vice President Joe Biden is leading Donald Trump now. The counts kind of vary because I think different news agencies are giving him Arizona and others are not. But what I'm seeing is the conservative count is, I believe 253 to 214-ish in there, with Joe Biden having at least right now a clearer path to get to 270 electoral college votes to become the next president. However, Donald Trump doesn't give a shit about none of that math. Trump and his campaign have lobbied a bevy of lawsuits in different states across the country. Some have already been dismissed. Some could actually go forward, especially most notably in Pennsylvania, where I believe the state GOP has offered up a legal challenge to how some of the ballots that arrived after Election Day are counted. So we will get into the details about what is happening in Pennsylvania and, of course, across the country. I definitely wanted to update the gang, y'all, of course, being the gang, the viewers, on some of the races that we were discussing earlier in the week on Tuesday, including the mayoral race out in Portland, the Maricopa County attorney's race, which took a very, I want to say, interesting turn, really, because the Republican incumbent actually had to be admitted to the hospital with bleeding on the brain on election night. And I think the votes are still being counted in that race as well. So we have a whole lot to get into. We're also going to be joined a little bit later in the hour with friend of the show, Adriel Hampton. Adriel's a political consultant, possibly the presumed socialist candidate for to be governor of California in 2024. And we're going to discuss why this election was so close, everybody. White nationalism and white supremacy. If you thought she was going to go gently into that good night, oh, no, you were mistaken. Donald Trump has managed to pull as many popular votes as Joe Biden. This was a record-setting election. Both Joe Biden and Donald Trump so far have garnered more votes than Barack Obama, I believe, in either 08 or 12. Big deal. People came out for this. And it wasn't just the disenfranchised, the historically marginalized communities. No, Donald Trump's people, the GOP, got out into the country. They dug up those closeted white supremacists, white nationalist votes, and they turned them out big time. And I think that Trump keeping this election as close as it has, the fact that we were not able to ascertain who the winner would be on election night to give you an idea of how close this election was, speaks volumes to the amount of people who support the racist rhetoric of this president. And Adriel's going to help us break some of that down. Also, some of the criticisms that are being levied at some progressives. Some establishment Democrats are pretty grumpy that Donald Trump was able to have as much as 10% of the Black vote in the state of Florida and a decent chunk of the Latino vote in the state of Florida. Missing the point. It doesn't matter whether or not Donald Trump was able to siphon off some Black or Latino votes. The big deal is that the majority of the white voters still stand by what Donald Trump is selling. Therein lies the problem. That is the root of the issue here. So we're going to get into that discussion coming up in a bit. Are we cool to look at some vids now, Dwayne? Oh, the vids. I'm sorry. Okay, well, I wanted us to actually take a look at some election night activity, I would imagine, by the police. There was arrests and protests really across the country. In Minneapolis, for example, as many as 600 people were arrested. And we're going to take a look at some video coming out of New York City where people who are in favor of every vote being counted took to the streets to voice that desire, and they were met by New York City's not so finest. Let's take a look at how the NYPD treated protesters as they were being kettled and then subsequently beaten by the cops.
NYPD officers are laughing while protesters are being kettled and beaten in the street. All of these protesters have had nowhere to go. Protesters are packed like sardines on the sidewalk with nowhere else to go.
Now, you know, here on Burn It Down with Kim Brown earlier this week, we showed you videos of NYPD sitting in their squad cars, their marked police cars, while on duty, while on the clock, while getting paid their taxpayer-funded salaries, and sitting on the loud horn and advocating for Trump 2020, daring bystanders to post said videos online, which of course they did and went viral. And now we see the New York Police Department, who, by the way, endorsed Donald Trump for president and perhaps allowing things to turn south because their candidate did not win. So there's a lot going on there. As I mentioned, there was hundreds of people arrested in Minneapolis as they shut down the highway out there, I-94, in response to all the votes being counted, perhaps maybe even some Trump folks mixed in there as well. Other things I wanted us to talk about, including, like I mentioned, the lawsuits brought by the Trump administration in the states of Georgia, which I believe that one was already dismissed, and in Michigan were already dismissed. But I want us to turn to our next guest right now, because the state of Pennsylvania is in the national spotlight for a presidential election, a position that the Commonwealth is usually not finding itself in. Usually it's Florida messing this up, right? Or Ohio or some other state. Pennsylvania tends to do things pretty smoothly, pretty quietly. Not this time around, where the ongoing vote count of absentee, mail-in, military ballots, provisional ballots still continues in Center City at the convention center there in Philadelphia. And that is where we are going to begin here on this episode of Burn It Down. Today, we are joined with Bob Stewart. Bob is a local judge of elections, part of the Democratic Committee. He's a Democratic Committee person, I should say. Bob Stewart is an elected judge of elections and serves on the executive board of Philadelphia's 58th Democratic Ward. Also a former journalist. He's covered the courts, government, and politics. So I'm sure that Bob has an interest in this outcome from a variety of perspectives. Bob, we appreciate you making some time and joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, so let's start with what we currently know, what the latest is at 10 minutes after 5 on Friday. Currently, Joe Biden leads the Commonwealth, leads the vote count by a slim enough margin that perhaps things could still be contested. But what are we awaiting from the Secretary of State and the Pennsylvania Board of Elections in terms of the latest information to come out of the state regarding the vote count?
But the latest that I heard, and I don't have 10-minute old information, but a little bit older than that. But they still have tens of thousands of votes to get in from Allegheny County and Philadelphia. I don't believe they even touched the provisional ballots before today. If they have yet at all, they still have the mail-in ballots, and they can't do the provisional ballots till they're done the mail-in ballots. So once they're done the mail-in ballots, they go to the provisional, because the provisional was used pretty much as a backup. If you mailed in, say, in mid-October, but then the website didn't say that you got your vote was recorded yet, you could go to the polling place and get a provisional ballot and fill that out. So when they get to the provisionals, then they're going to cross-reference that and say, oh, no, this vote was counted already in the mail. They're going to throw the provisional out. But if they said, oh, the mail-in never got here, or it just wasn't, something was wrong with it, you already backed it up with a provisional ballot, they'll count that. And then some people just do provisionals because they're not in the registration book. There's a lot of reasons. So there's a lot more votes to count, the way I see it. And I don't think it's, because the margins are so close, I don't think they can call the race in Pennsylvania for some time, especially with those kinds of outlying ballots.
So when we say sometime, Bob, because, Americans are not used to have to wait for stuff, right? It's like we're being
instant gratification, right?
Right. This is counter to our whole ethos as a nation. We don't wait for nothing. So when we're talking about what the wait times could possibly be, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about 9 o'clock tonight? Are we talking about next week? Are we talking about possibly even December?
So I think because this is such a new process, normally all of the mail-in ballots, in any case, in the formerly known as absentee, and they still have absentee, but that stuff would have all been done by today. And then they would have went to the provisional ballots. And a lot of the provisionals get thrown out. A lot of times it's people who aren't registered to vote, but they didn't know, or they went to the wrong place, things of those nature. So a lot of them get thrown out, but they have to be reviewed first. And the 3 commissioners, 2 are from the majority party, 1 is from the minority party, review each one. And usually it's, just a couple thousand of them, but now it's going to be a lot. It's got to be a record amount of provisionals that came in, and they have to cross-reference that mail-in list to see, this voter, just didn't know that their mail-in ballot was recorded. So there's going to be a lot at the front. I think that's going to be a slower process than even the mail-in counting, because the mail-in counting, you have it. It's a pretty easy read. You have it. There's barcodes. There's all kinds of things. Provisional ballots are really plain Jane, just green and white envelopes, and people fill them out live on the scene. And there's a lot more variability to it. So I think there's going to take some time to kind of review them. And to be honest with you, a lot of Republicans use that. Even in Philly, there was about 10 in the division I was in, and 5 of them were some of the Republican voters. So there's going to be more to review. A lot of people who didn't get the mail in, that just say they never received it. Or they had it, but they didn't bring it with them to the polling place, so they couldn't surrender it to go into the machine. I think that might take some time. I don't know that you can put an estimate on it, because I think the poll watchers might say, hey, I want to check that ballot more. I want to further review on that. I want to check the signature. I want to check the information, make sure it's accurate. Let alone hanging Chad kind of things. Is the circle all the way filled in? Did someone vote for 2 candidates in the same race? You get into all those things too. So that said, if they're down to 10,000 provisionals and there's a 13,000 vote lead, well, then you can call it, because it's obviously not going to have all the ballots go that way. So that's really a matter of just the timing of everything.
Talk to me about what the tone is, what the mood is in Philadelphia. We're seeing a lot of pictures coming from where the vote is being counted at the convention center, I believe. And so there are people on all sides. I can't even say both sides at this point. There are pro-Trump people, pro-Biden people who are just interested in making sure that the election is executed, I suppose, fairly, people who are there to perhaps de-escalate any tensions. We know that there have been at least one potential threat to the people counting the votes. 2 Virginia men, according to NBC News, were taken at least into custody or questioned by police for allegedly making threats towards the vote counting process. They were found, with long guns. I believe AR-15s were mentioned. No arrests in this particular incident, but it's bringing attention to the city, to the state, in ways that you guys maybe are not accustomed to. How are people feeling in southeastern Pennsylvania this evening?
I think there's part of it's a hysteria. It's just a hysteria about the whole thing. You voted, you want someone to win, so there's that. There's that drama, and everyone has that. But now we're center stage. There's a lot of electoral votes at stake, and this is like, even though the other states could be a path to victory for either candidate, I mean, the big one is Pennsylvania, and because of the volume of the votes that need to be counted, Philadelphia is the center of Pennsylvania right now. I think there's excitement, but just the hysteria. I mean, the calls that I'm getting from people from both parties, we need to demand a recount, or we need to demand all the ballots get counted. Like, well, guys, you're talking about the same thing. Let's just let it play out and see what happens. I mean, this is definitely going to go to an automatic recount. I don't see either one pulling away more than a half a percentage point at the end of this. So it's going to be automatically recounted. And that'll solve a lot. I think that'll ease some people's minds. But you're still getting into the point where some people are saying these are fake ballots or fraudulently ballots, or the count is being done fraudulently, which is kind of odd in that sense because there's so many witnesses. But I mean that might be, some people are just never going to accept what the end result is, no matter which side it is. So we'll have to see what happens there, but the tone is hysteria. I mean, people are really worried about what's going to happen when this final decision comes down. Is a powder keg about to blow up in our city. And like you said, we're not used to being center stage. It's kind of usually, it's usually a solid state going one way. You kind of know before the election which way Pennsylvania is going to go. And I mean, here it is, days after the election, we're not really positive yet. So.
And that's the super interesting part about Pennsylvania being in this position in this election cycle. Obviously, for a while, Pennsylvania wasn't necessarily a contested state. It had been predominantly Democratic, at least in national elections, for some time prior to 2016. And then with the razor-thin margin in which Trump was able to win the state, why is Pennsylvania now in play for Republicans, or in a way that perhaps it had not been in previous cycles before 2016? And talk to us about how Trump is popular in the state outside of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, but in Pennsyltucky, as what some folks are prone to call it, Donald Trump has people, and they show up for him clearly.
Yeah, I mean, he has a lot of fans. I mean, it's a weird situation. Obviously, he was a celebrity kind of person before, having TV shows and all that kind of stuff. So you already kind of have that head start over somebody else. But there's just definitely just this fanatical following. It's like a sports team. People follow him like a sports team. I think the Republicans did a great job organizing to get out the vote this time around specifically. I think last time it was the Democrats failed to get out the vote. And you can see that in the numbers from 2008, 12, 16. You see that thing where basically Hillary Clinton got less votes than Barack Obama. Same state, should have been more just by sheer population growth. Why did that happen? And it was basically, I think they overlooked the state. The Republicans in 2012, Mitt Romney came to southeastern Pennsylvania very, very late. I think it was that was probably the first hint, maybe in the mid 2010 on, maybe people started seeing, maybe something's there. And I think the Republicans in 2012 saw it, but saw it too late. And then 2016, Hillary didn't come out. She had her last night, the night before the election rally in Philadelphia. And, that means that they thought there might have been a problem there. And I think now, forget it. I mean, Pennsylvania is going to be center stage. In Philadelphia, it's going to be get out the vote for Democrats. In Pennsylvania, it's going to be overall get out the vote for Republicans. But I will say that there's people who I know personally who were approached by Republicans about changing their registration and becoming a Republican in the past few years. They did a lot more grassroots and not really popular stuff that people caught on that was happening, but they were actually getting some people. And then in mid-October, right before the deadline, there was a lot of Republican registrations statewide. So you have to give them credit. There was a lot of hard work that they did to get that done. And I do that kind of work for where I am in my neighborhood. And it's not easy work to go out there and knock on doors and get people and make the phone calls. And they did it. And so, there's a lot of people who feel the way that they do because they were able to get people in there and they got them in. And it's a record numbers for both sides. It's insane.
Incredible. So, Bob, before we let you go, I wanted to ask about the potential for court challenges in the state of Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I keep calling it a state. It's the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
The Trump campaign has made it clear that they will bring a lawsuit, with merit or not merit. But what is the likelihood of a court challenge coming in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that could actually perhaps have some teeth and could actually be heard by a judge?
So, interestingly enough, I covered an election 3 years ago that led to 4 convictions for election fraud, and I was working for the Stewart newspaper at the time. And we had a good team there, a real good team of young journalists that came in, and we pounded the ground and we did the job. And it ended up we were the only journalist institution that really covered this race because the Philadelphia district attorney that day got indicted by the feds. So Philadelphia, there you go. Bad things happen. Is that what they say? But that election, when that all happened, and then there started being court challenges there, we looked into were there ever a court challenge where you literally overturned the result, because it's always when you hear these court challenges and someone gets a slap on the wrist, but it doesn't change the election result. Well, there was one. And it was in the early 90s. It was for a senatorial seat in the state legislature. And basically what they had proved in federal court, not Commonwealth court, in federal court, they skipped Commonwealth court because they thought it would be too biased. In federal court, they proved that there was so much rampant fraud in the election, and it hinged upon absentee ballots. I spoke to the person who brought the suit. He was the guy who ended up getting the Senate seat after losing the election. And it was based on absentee ballots. And basically, some political operatives went to these people, got them their ballots, and then pretty much filled them out for them and then mailed them in. There was real signatures, but there was just fraud in the way they did it. They were handling the ballots. You're not supposed to handle the ballot. You can get someone signed up for an absentee and you can, be involved, but you're not allowed to you're not supposed to watch them fill it out. They're supposed to be able to do it in private, a secrecy ballot, put it in the envelope. And then you could be returning your opponent's vote, you know what I mean, that you don't even know because it's in the secrecy envelope. They were kind of skipping that part. And then there was some money being exchanged. People were getting $5 a ballot, whatever. Well, they proved this. And they proved it to such an extent in federal court that the federal court removed the elected state senator from that seat, removed him, and installed the loser of the election. They didn't have a revote. They installed him immediately. And that was a big case back then. Here's the funny thing. The guy's name is Bruce Marks, and that guy was Trump's lawyer after that fact. After he won that seat, he didn't win the next election. His name is Bruce Marks. He is a Russian-speaking lawyer, has an office in Moscow. Very nice guy, by the way. I mean, he was nice enough to give me a full-on interview about what happened and everything, and gave me a lot of inside info. Some of it off the record, which was more entertaining, if you can believe that. But I think what I heard last night and the way the verbiage coming out of President Trump's mouth is that they're going to try that kind of an angle, not so much try to throw out, certain ballots, which they can still do with the provisionals, but try to maybe say that there was so much rampant fraud that portions of this election, maybe if you say, hey, in this division or this ward in Philadelphia, there was so much rampant fraud, we got to throw that part out. The problem with that is if you didn't do the recon back then, you're going to need to do an investigation now. So you're going to need federal agents to go investigate people who turned in these mail-ins and have them admit that, oh, I didn't do it myself. This person came and knocked on my door and said, I had to do this and they were going to do it for me. And I had to vote for this candidate. And then I had to give them the envelope. Easier said than done. I mean, that kind of work should have been being done in September and October, if that's what your plan was. Meanwhile, all I see is the focus is on where's the count. And then they're down there. We want to be closer to the people doing the work in the convention center. And that's not where the fraud would be going on. That's already after the fact. So I have a feeling because of the close connection between this candidate, who was one of the few candidates who ever pulled off something like this, taking a case to court and getting the person out of the seat and taking that seat, that's their plan. And I don't, Trump would have to be aware of how that works, and his team has to be aware of how that works. I mean, I don't know if they hired him. I haven't talked to that man in a while. Our paper went out of business. I don't have my access to my old emails. Otherwise, I'd call him and be like, "Hey, are you involved?" But I can't imagine that that's not their plan. That has to be their plan, because that seems to be the only way in court. But here's the crazy thing: that's not going to be done overnight. That's not something that gets filed Monday and ruled on Tuesday. You're talking about an investigation. This gentleman actually got that seat months after the term had started. So, the Supreme Court could decide to hear it right away, but you haven't gathered the evidence of what you're ascertaining happened. I don't know what the plan is. Is the plan to not give up the presidency until the case is heard? You know what I mean? What is? I don't know. I don't want to presume. I'm just saying, like, I don't understand how it would happen that fast if you haven't already done the recon on what you're saying is the fraud.
It'll be interesting. And we know that clearly, Donald Trump and his minions don't necessarily operate within the same realm as reality as the rest of us. And they sort of believe that they can make things happen. And in some instances, they do make things happen. So it will be interesting to see what the expectation, or even better yet, what the outcome would be of any potential litigation. But I absolutely believe that Trump and the GOP sort of long game in stalling a lot of the appointment of some of these federal judges. I know not necessarily at the Commonwealth level, but some of these federal judges during the Obama administration, and allowing Trump to appoint a lot of judges may have been part of the strategy leading us up to this point. Maybe they think they have some favors in the pockets of some of these newly appointed jurists, and it can go in their favor. But we will see. Like you said, we can't really presume. We can just operate with the information that we have, and we appreciate you bringing us information. We've been speaking with Bob Stewart. Bob is a local judge of elections, Democratic committee person representing Philadelphia's 58th Democratic Ward. Shout out to the 215-610. We love Philly. Thank you so much, Bob, for stopping by and sharing your perspective with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
All right, gang. Hey, we apparently have some comments from the comments. John Viev has been slacking me some comments from the comments. And hey, to everyone who has perhaps not seen us in a few weeks, we are on Burn It Down with Kim Brown YouTube channel. This show has its own YouTube channel, so kindly go over there and like and subscribe. Thank you very much. One of our long-term viewers, Paul X BSOG, says election fraud is real, voter fraud is right-wing conspiracy. That I like the way you put that, Paul. Accurate. I'll take that. Also from the comments, Von Cruel says, great title, America and its ongoing love affair with racism. Hey, man, if the only thing America loves better than racism is genocides, it's the favorites of this country, man. This is what this country does best, better than anybody. Also from the comments, A1 Bud says, magic. If the left cheated, we wouldn't see a red wave down the ticket. Yeah, it could. I guess, man. I can't really call that. And last one we're going to read before we go into our next thing. DIC says, why do so many act like this is new? An artificial created, quote, country based on genocide, white supremacism, resource theft, clubbing, torturing innocent people here, and the worldwide mythology. I'm not sure what you say is new, DIC. The theft of democracy, is that new? Yeah, no, that's not new. Actually, no. Absolutely not new. So, yep, y'all can always log into the chat in the comments, share your thoughts with us, your comments, questions. I'd love to hear from you. Now, you guys, we're going to move into the analytical part of the discussion of the election as to why this election was even as close as it was. Whose fault is it that the election was close? Was it the small number of Black and brown voters who were siphoned off to vote for Donald Trump? Or was it the large majority of white voters who did support Donald Trump? Was it a lack of organization? Was it the pandemic? Was it a variety of things? Well, here to help us get to the bottom of what exactly we are witnessing in these historical times, Adriel Hampton, friend of the show, is joining us. Adriel is a political consultant. Adriel has also worked as a journalist, an investigator, the first candidate to announce their candidacy via Twitter, running for Congress back in 2009. So Adriel is a trailblazer in many, many ways, and we appreciate him joining us today from California. Adriel, how goes it?
It's good. It's good. Although I'm like held together at this point by like edibles and a back brace. It's been a long week.
It has been a long week. And before we get into some of the analysis of, the election at large, I wanted just to run through some things happening in your neck of the woods in the state of California, that lovely progressive bastion where they still...
Oh my God. Don't say that.
Gas and beat the shit out of people.
We just got bought by corporations is what happened here in California.
Man, talk to me about Prop 22. Adriel, what the fuck happened?
Well, I mean, I think that like I'm as a consultant, as a strategist, as someone who produces media, I'm basically in the business of propaganda, but we mix it with organizing. So like to clean it up a little bit, we launder our propaganda through organizing. The Prop 22 was this problem when you have tens of thousands of employees of 4 companies that do delivery or rideshare services, each chipping in $50,000 to run a $200 million campaign to make sure those workers never get basic labor rights, basic human rights for someone who's working, running around on behalf of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, gets in an accident and the company wants to disown them, right? Or gets sick and no longer has any source of income. And this Prop 22 passed because they made the workers think that they were all going to lose their jobs if this thing didn't pass. And they used their giant customer bases to just make a constant barrage of material, propaganda, telling people that this had to pass or you wouldn't have access to rideshare. They got Mothers Against Drunk Driving to say this thing had to pass. You have $200 million. Also, you can just donate to whoever you want and get them on your side. So it's awful in California because we have 40 million people. And when, this was a mail election, and so you're getting more and more participation, but these companies are able to spend unlimited amounts of money to override our legislature. So it's actually a really big problem. And it looks, Prop 21, which was a rent control measure, was backed. A billionaire real estate investors were fighting it because it means they can't make as much money over the lifetime of a property. So it wasn't. There were a few lights in California, and a number in LA as well. But there's also a lot of really bad results here.
I want us to talk about some of them bad results, but nationwide, because, I'm sure California progressives probably took their share of L's. But, when we're looking at this race for the White House, Adriel, I don't see a winner here. And what I mean by that is regardless if Trump wins or Biden wins, we collectively lose. And I know that people don't really want to hear that. And I'm not here to say that Trump is not so bad. Trump's a piece of shit, okay? Huge raging fascist. Yes, the peril of people's human rights, the future of the earth, the climate, all these things are in flux with Donald Trump at the reins of power. However, Joe Biden's positions are not great on some of these very same issues. So I feel as though, if you're a progressive person, if you're a person coming from a marginalized community, it's a lose-lose situation. But I wanted us to take a peek, if we could. Dwayne, I'll pop up those voter numbers, if we could, that graphic from USA Today, because Adriel, at the end of the day, 150 million people came out to vote, which is incredible. They're saying that this is historic turnout for a century. It's a graphic. It has a map of everything, and it says how many people voted in the popular vote for both Donald Trump. And there we go. So let's take a look at this. So here we are, 2020 National Popular Vote Tracker. And it says Joe Biden so far has 74 million votes. Donald Trump has 69 million votes. So far, according to those who keep track of these things, these are the number one and number two top popular vote getters of all time across all elections. This is including Obama, because the importance and the urgency of this election, plus the easeability that a lot of states made it so people could vote via absentee mail-in ballots and early voting. So, Adriel, some people got some splaining to do, because there's been some critiques of progressives. Can we pop up Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's tweet thread, if we could, please, Dwayne?
I'm glad I've read that one, because I was worried. I've been avoiding getting triggered by these crazy liberals who want to blame the people who did all the work for their failure to convince other white people.
Oh my goodness! Thank you, Adriel. Thank you for saying it. So I don't have to say it.
Well, I like the premise of this episode, because it is like, the problem is we now know that we have 70 million people who will support an open white supremacist government. And that's just, we've never, I think, had to really face that head on. You could say, like, Bush pretended to be a compassionate conservative, and then people voted for him again, but it was like, because he was a patriot, he loved us all, he was bringing us all together. Trump doesn't even pretend. He's like leaving people freezing out on the like miles from their cars. And, he's killing people with the coronavirus. Like, they say 700 people directly from his rallies and 30,000 or so infected. And it's like, so then you have to say, well, and then 70 million people still voted for him. Some of them could have been fooled, just like the Prop 22 thing. I think a lot of people were fooled, but the majority of those 70 million people are fine with this being a white supremacist country. And that is like a shocking, and I hope that people remember that and don't, exactly as you say, don't just say, we're going to celebrate Biden, because you can't celebrate when you have that level of participation and zeal for a Donald Trump Republican Party. It's so gross. And the Republicans have so much to answer for, because even, they pretended to have these Never Trump and Lincoln Project factions. And it seems like that comes down to a handful of talking heads. One of the things we're really doing today, we've been working with grassroots organizers in Pennsylvania, is we're creating content and getting it out on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, claiming the victory for young people, for indigenous folks, for Black Americans. I mean, Georgia is just the incredible example, with this massive increase in turnout in what was traditionally a red state. And then also just for the working class, for people who aren't. I heard something on the radio on Wednesday that said that one of the highest turnouts for Trump was people making $100,000 to $200,000 a year. So it's like, basically people making less than 100 are supporting Biden, supporting some kind of change, some kind of relief. And then like the wealthy, more elite liberals are also supporting Biden. And then there's this band of people who think they're well off, and they're probably struggling just as much as the next person in real life, in terms of debt, in terms of medical problems, in terms of people suffering from COVID right now and from unemployment. And yet they turned out for Donald Trump. And the only thing going for Donald Trump is lies and white supremacy. And it's just, it's horrible and awful. And it's awful to think that we have to wait another, couple of 2.5 months to actually be done with him. It's very concerning.
Dwayne, pop up, I believe it's A3 and A2. I'm not sure if we had a chance to look at those, because, Adriel, you raised a great point. I mean, to sit in the same country with 70 million people who are, I can only assume, are either white supremacists or white nationals themselves, or who don't have a problem with a white nationalist, white supremacist.
We wonder how the Holocaust happened. It happened because the bulk of the population sat there, and what we just see is that almost half are ready to just sit there while Donald Trump does whatever he wants to whoever he wants,
and including kill people. Dwayne, pop them tweets up for me. The LA Times ran a piece that talked about how Trump did better in counties that COVID was running rampant. Counties with worst virus surges overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. That's troubling. Also, Dwayne, the tweets that Adriel just referenced, where the Stanford study revealed that at least 30,000 infections can be tied to Donald Trump's maskless rallies, the 18 or so rallies that he held around the country. Now, this study has not been peer reviewed, just FYI, but Stanford said we got the numbers, baby. 700 deaths, potentially COVID related to these Trump rallies. So Trump doesn't give shit about his supporters. Like Adriel mentioned, he left supporters in Nebraska and I believe another state just freezing their asses off with no way to get back to the parking lot, because that's how much Donald Trump cares about his own people. But Adriel, the tears of white liberals is really pissing me off, because like the way that people are in a state of shock that this election is so close, and that they clearly didn't get the message that was sent to all of us in 2016, even before then, when Trump got legitimized and got some credibility from the cable news networks, allowing him to have his press conferences about President Obama's birth certificate, unedited, unfettered. They just let Trump stand up there and talk shit for 30 minutes uninterrupted. Dwayne, I want to go to Stephen Colbert. Stephen Colbert took to his program last night, and he was a wee bit emotional. Now, I like Stephen Colbert quite a bit. I thought that what he did at Comedy Central with the Colbert Report, and prior to that, The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, amazing work, awesome satirist. He's the shit. But Stephen Colbert got to chill out with all this liberal tears. So let me set it up for you. So Stephen Colbert began his show dressed in black, saying that he had a feeling that Trump was going to come out at a press conference, which he did, cast aspersions, cast doubts upon the validity and the credibility of the election and of the vote. And we'll pick it up from there. Here's Stephen Colbert.
I mean, he said this stuff back in 2016.
I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election if I win.
So we all knew he would do this. What I didn't know is that it would hurt so much. I didn't expect this to break my heart.
So for those asking, shout out to Taylor Hebden. Taylor Hebden, one of our producers here, she asked, she's like, is Stephen Colbert, was he kidding? No, he was not kidding, honey. Those are delicious white liberal tears of sadness, profound disappointment that our election is going to shit, and white nationalist is very close to winning re-election, although it's not looking likely, but it was close. Adriel, why do these white liberals have to seriously shut the fuck up with this nonsense? Like, have they not been paying attention? Have they not been seeing the way that communities of color, marginalized people, gay and trans people, indigenous people have been treated throughout history, but not to mention that, but the lack of policies set forth by establishment Democrats, the fact that Trump has been able to galvanize and do a major power grab, abetted by the GOP in ways that we have not seen before, all fueled by white nationalism and white supremacy. Why is Stephen Colbert on TV crying?
I mean, it's a bubble. That's the challenge, I think, is that the same way I call them like the blue anons, because they're in this cult of thinking that their worldview is the worldview, and it's literally it's not even like a majority minority. It's like a small sliver of the population, but they're the media makers, right? And now we have social media and we have all these different channels. One of the things I just was loving those Ocasio-Cortez tweets today, because she was, going right into my industry, which is political digital, and she was saying that the Democrats did not do a great job. Just like your previous guest, I heard in Pennsylvania that the GOP did massive registration work, getting tons of new Republicans. And you're right, it's fueled by white supremacy. It's horrific, and by lies, I think. I'm not going to give anyone a pass who voted for Trump, because I think they minimally are fine with the white supremacy. But there's also massive amounts of money, massive amounts of disinformation flowing into people's media channels, and every channel is different. There's like a way to do it on Instagram, and a way to do it with TikTok, and a way to do it with Facebook, and they also have hundreds of millions of dollars for television. So the problem is the Democrats they're just not fighting fire with fire, and that's what AOC is calling out, because during a pandemic, a lot of people gave up door knocking, and there's questions about that. My understanding is that Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib both continued door knocking with social distancing and masks, but most campaigns stopped it. And so what do you replace it with? And I worked with Roots Action on a campaign to reach swing state voters who had been Bernie supporters, and to say, like, hold your nose if you think Biden stinks, but we got to get rid of Trump, and then we can get on to the next thing. And I think that I try not to worry too much about the liberal tiers or their jabs, because it's easy to get into these fights, especially on Twitter, and just go and go. But I think what this election showed is that progressives now know how to win, know how to reach people, and know how to organize in a way that the Democratic Party itself had forgotten. And progressives who were upset with things not changing decade after decade are starting to take it back using organizing. And then I'm scared of the Republican Party. It's very, very bad. It's very, very horrible. And in many ways, it'd be better to have no Republican Party, or very small Republican Party, and a large Democratic Party where you had progressives and you had the old blue dog thing. And then, I think also that even helps socialists exist and get larger. But right now, you have these two horrible corporate parties separated by, it's crazy that it's like 4 million votes out of 150 million separate these two guys. Like, that should not be happening. It should be like a 70-30 split of the popular vote. There's something very, very, very wrong, with what we're doing and how we're spending money and the kinds of the parties. Something very wrong with them,
Well, there's that, and the fact that, first of all, Dwayne, do me a favor, pop up those AOC tweets again, because I want to read them for some of our viewers who may not be able to read the screen. So I just want to read them aloud so people can understand what AOC said in her Twitter thread. She led off by saying, there are folks running around on TV blaming progressivism for Democratic underperformance. I was curious, so I decided to open the hood on struggling campaigns of candidates who are blaming progressives for their problems. Almost all had awful execution on digital during a pandemic. Underinvestment across the board. Some campaigns spent zero on digital. Adriel, unheard of in 2020, spent $0 on digital the week before the election. Others who spent did so in very poor ways. If I spent only $12,000 on TV the week before an election and then blamed others after, you'd ask questions. That's how it looks seeing this. And this is the last part of this thread. I'm just going to read. Ideology and messaging are spicy convos, and a lot of people want to jump to, but sometimes it's about execution and technical capacity. Digital execution was not good. Polls were off. Ironically, DCCC banned the firms who are the best in the country at Facebook because they work with progressives. And Adriel,
hey, thanks for the subtweet, AOC.
Right. I mean, that's sort of the direction that we go here. So let's presume for a minute, if we could, that Joe Biden is going to be the 46th president of the United States. Joe Biden is not on the right side of a lot of issues. And when we're trying to figure out what the Democrats are going to do and whether or not
do we get to cuss on this show? Is that
you can cuss your ass off? Yes, please cuss.
I was going to say that. Well, Biden's digital is weak as shit. And so that's good for progressives, because AOC is 100% right that the best firms now are working for progressives, because we don't want to have to put up with DCCC bullshit and bow down and kiss somebody's ring to get contracts. That's really ridiculous. It's gross, and that's one of the big things that's wrong with politics. And the other thing is, I think that these firms that she's referencing work for much better rates, particularly when they're working with progressives, because we care about them, right? And we care about them winning. So what does that mean for the future? It means that Joe Biden is at a disadvantage in his own party, because there are interests, labor, folks who care about Medicare for all. There's Sunrise with the Green New Deal. There's real movements behind these that are actually fantastic at digital, and Biden's very weak. Kamala Harris's team is good, but they're more progressive than Biden. Even if they could be jerks to you if you're a Bernie person. So I think it means that the big argument we were making in swing states is that voting for Biden gives us someone that we can pressure campaign constantly to move the ball forward on climate change, on Medicare for all, and other reforms. Whereas Trump was so chaotic. He was doing rope-a-dope all the time, and he'll continue. One of my business partners said, "I will celebrate on January 21st." Not gonna give, because this guy, like I say, you don't want to make too much of him, because I don't think he was able to consolidate power. He clearly has not been able to manipulate the vote counting in the ways they like. They messed up the mail, right? I mean, that's what's crazy. Imagine a political party that literally messes up the mail service of a 300 million person country just so they can stall the votes of their opponent and make sure that they don't get counted. And they do that. And then they're trying to stop the counties from counting, but there's 3,200 counties counting votes. As my understanding is that every county does them separately. Plus there's the state officials. So the greatest thing about this is that Trump was not able to consolidate power. Now, Biden will be better at it, because he'll be inheriting a lot of the Obama stuff. I mean, there's either people who have been out for a while, or there's people who burrowed in at low-level positions. And so will Biden be able to consolidate a lot of power in the White House? Yes, very quickly. Whether he controls the rest of the country depends on whether or not he's doing things that are good for the people who voted for him. Because so far, what most presidents do is they do things that are really good for that kind of financial elite and people who are better off, and people who are white. And that's been going on for decades and decades. So will Joe Biden serve the people who elected him? That's the central question. If he does, he's going to have this great legacy as someone who saved the country from Trump. If he fails to do that, he's going to be, it's going to be bad for him in history. So he's not going to get a pass just for taking out Trump, I think.
Absolutely not. And I believe that
he didn't
Mitch
do it.
McConnell,
We did. The people did it.
And that's a big part. First of all, if Joe Biden is elected, chances are he will be weak as fuck when entering the White House, with the Senate still presumably controlled by the Republicans, and with minor pickups in the House. I mean, this is going to be a weak Democratic establishment for a first term at minimum, going forward. Just think about Obama's second term again, right? All the stuff Obama perhaps wanted to do was stymied by McConnell and his trolls. But the real issue for Democrats, Adriel, has to be that so many progressives did hold their nose and go vote for Joe Biden, though he stood in opposition to a lot of the positions and policies that progressives hold dear. They did so in order to get rid of Trump. And in 4 years, there's not going to be well, shit, there could be another Trump. Trump could come back if he is defeated this time around, or there could be someone worse than Trump, like a more polished and together Ted Cruz or someone along those lines. How are the Democrats going to still keep progressives in their corner or in their circle, at least, when it comes to national elections? Democrats refuse to expand the left. They instead want to reach to the center and grab at these, pseudo-conservative, centrists or sometiming Republicans. Can the Democratic Party expect to keep winning national elections if they keep telling the progressive left, fuck you?
Well, I mean, they need to be very careful with a Republican Party that is this strong and this crazy, because the progressives represent a more activist portion of the Democratic base, right? It has different constituencies, but you look at progressives are the ones who want to organize, want to go door to door. And the other thing I think that it's really big to think about is that the progressives in the Democratic Party, after 5 years of kind of the Bernie Sanders campaign and political revolution and everything adjacent to that, are better organized, more recognized in the media. People and like regular people know the progressives are out there, right? You don't have to be like a real nerd to find us. So our policy positions, like Medicare for All and like the Green New Deal, are wildly popular, especially with younger people. So I think the answer with Biden, it's the time to organize. And you think about Kamala Harris, her game is that she could be in for 8 years after him or take over if he, ever has any health issues. She's right there. And that's scary for progressives who think we don't want Kamala Harris. But on the other hand, presidents have to represent their constituencies, or as you said, they will lose that national election in 2024. So Kamala Harris, I think, could be someone who says, okay, I'll do the Green New Deal. She's already said they're going to do decriminalization of marijuana, even though Biden has been very aggressively anti-legalization, and he's gone on the stage with a pharmaceutical company and said marijuana is a gateway drug. But Kamala Harris is much more progressive than Joe Biden is. She's the one who attacked him on the stage about busing. And I think that what we need to do is say, we want the Green New Deal. We want Medicare for All. We want full relief of student loan debt. And in the short term, we want COVID relief that actually gives people some kind of supplementary income, not based on their employment status, as well as free medical care, at least in the temporary zone. Because it's just insane that 250,000 people in our country have died in less than a year because of a friggin' pandemic. It's just insane. So I think progressives are in an incredible position to pressure President Biden, and it's like you can let him think it's his idea, and I'm sure that there will be a lot of back channeling around that. But he needs to do some big things, and then the Democrats could have 30 years of or they could just be, at the end of the day, you don't want it switching back between a party that represents diverse coalitions and diverse communities in America. You don't want it switching back and forth with the white supremacist party. That's just very unhealthy for a nation, for it to yo-yo back and forth. But we have to hold it accountable.
I want to play this clip real quick from former Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill, now MSNBC analyst. Cool. This is what she had to say.
Fail up, right?
Right.
I guess it's not failing up. She was a senator, right?
She was a senator, and she was one of those doofy not pseudo. She was
like Blue Dog, right?
Republican, exactly. Like she was a conservative Democrat in a now conservative state in Missouri. Shout out to the 314. What's up, KC? Out there also as well. But this is what Claire McCaskill had to say about the future of the Democratic Party and who they plan on reaching out to as they continue to go forward. This is from MSNBC.
whether you're talking guns or issues surrounding the right to abortion in this country, or things like gay marriage and the right for transsexuals and other people who we as a party have tried to, quote unquote, look after and make sure that they're treated fairly. As we circled those issues, we left some voters behind, and Republicans dove in with a vengeance.
Ooh, there's so much wrong. It was so problematic. That was like the most problematic.
God. Yeah, it sounded like it was an interview from the 90s.
First, Claire McCaskill, update your language, honey. Join the rest of us aunties. Is absolutely not transsexuals. It is transgender folks, okay? So that's strike one. It should be strike one and strike two, actually. But when she talks about the marginalized communities that the Democratic Party has had to look after, Adriel, if that is not the most patronizing, patriarchal shit that could have fallen out her mouth. But this is the attitude of a lot of the establishment Democrats. There was a piece in Politico circulating that has some Democratic leaders warning, the party faithful not to veer too far to the left. The Democratic Party is way out of touch, and it looks like they're about to win. So they may be in denial about how out of touch they are, because possibly they could win the White House.
But 2022 is just around the corner, and there's House elections, all 435 members of the House. So
there is that. Well, we want to congratulate some members of the House. Congratulations to Cori Bush, the first Black woman to be elected to Congress from the state of Missouri. Also, congratulations going out to Jamal Bowman. Who else should we congratulate on their victory and their ascension to Congress, or in securing another term in Congress, Adriel? Who am I forgetting? I know Ilhan Omar won her race, and I feel like I'm forgetting other people.
Yeah. I've got is it Jermaine? No, I'm sorry.
I'm not sure if he won or lost. I have been so consumed.
I'm way beyond the tired point, but is it Marie Harrison? I have a graphic, but I can't.
No worries. I'm not. Listen, you're off.
I want to congratulate every American voter for doing your shit and then waiting for it. And also, we've got to say, it's more about everyone who got riled up about this. The fact that it was such a high turnout, people were riled up. If you're riled up, you better stay riled up, because people who don't care about other people are staying riled up. They want to do Tea Party 10X, Tea Party on a different scale and just take over the whole country. And it's just, and we can't, the answer is not the milquetoast liberalism that we see from the Democrats, where they say, we'll take care of you, but they don't actually care about equality. They don't actually care about reparations for harms done. They don't really care about facing the evils of this country. They kind of want to hide behind the flag and say, everybody get together. And, let's get Trump out. I am down with the thing of not having too much infighting in the Democrats until we see Biden inaugurated. But you can't allow them at all to think that they won, because there was nothing they won on. They won on being not Trump. And now we have to say, what do people really need? And there are many policies that Biden could do that would really transform people's lives in the short term. And there's a lot he can do. Even truth and justice reconciliation committees. Our country needs radical change. And perhaps the one thing about Biden is he's knows that he's, probably got one term in him if he's lucky. And he wants to make a mark, and hopefully he'll do some big things. I think that to some extent, these kind of politicians, they're corporate funded, which makes them scary. Like we just talked about Prop 22. But other than being corporate funded, they are to some extent a container for what their base wants. And so progressives have to make sure that it's very clear that we are the active partner in the base, and we need to be heard.
I appreciate your optimism, Adriel. And by the way, I think that candidate that whose name you were searching for was Mondaire Jones. Is that
Mondaire
accurate?
Jones? Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, but I'm sorry, Joe Biden.
I'm getting my New York politicians mixed up. That's the
Yes, I mean, Joe Biden has just stood in opposition to so many things important to me over the course of his entire political career. I don't have a lot of confidence in his ability or his even desire to want to make a mark. I mean, as a friend of the show, Tory Brown, Sankofa Brown on Twitter says, you know, Joe Biden is the respectable Republican, right? Like Trump is the batshit crazy Republican. Joe Biden is the respectable Republican here
I think it's a
make things back to normal. And from where I sit, normal was fucking trash before Donald Trump. Okay. So I don't want things back to normal. I want things better. And I'm not convinced that Joe Biden is the one to deliver that for us. But we have run out of time though, Adriel. All your points duly noted. I certainly appreciate you taking the time to join us and share your very valuable perspective. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim.
Appreciate the work that you guys do at the People City Council as well. Huge fan of the People City Council.
Oh yeah, they're great. That's most of the people on my team do that. It's not an official project, all volunteer stuff, but it's badass.
It is 100% badass. Listen, guys, that's it for the Friday edition of Burn It Down with Kim Brown. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. Don't forget to go to our YouTube channel and like and subscribe I would certainly appreciate it. We will be back on Tuesday to chop it up. We have some topics percolating. It will be something that you will enjoy and find interesting. Of course, y'all do not forget COVID-19 is still out here very much jumping on people. You need to wear your mask. You need to wash your hands. You need to social distance. And just be aware that this virus has killed 250,000 people in this country. I do not want it to kill you. So please take precautions and keep yourself safe. We will see y'all here back on Tuesday. Have a great weekend. See you later. Bye.